Welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Romig. Real brief history of my tenure here at FileMaker/Claris, although I can actually say Claris/FileMaker/Claris because I started in the late 80s doing tech support in, well, you can't see it, that building over there, which also used to be owned by Claris at the time. And then I moved into the training department. But then when Claris became FileMaker, they didn't need a lot of the people there. And so I got let go, sadly. But then I was able to come back as a contractor when FileMaker 6 became FileMaker 7. Was anybody doing development at that time? That was a huge deal for us, right? Because the file format changed significantly. So I was brought in to document all of the changes that took place when you converted your file from 6 to 7. And I remember on my first day back, I was really excited to be back. And they said, well, we want you to test the file conversion process and make sure it works and document anything that doesn't work. And so I said, great. So I made a super simple file. I probably used one of the templates or one of the starter solutions that comes with FileMaker Pro. And I just converted that, and like every single text field turned into a number field. I'm like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? It's okay to quit after your first day, right? But I stuck around there for about a year and a half until my contract was up. And then they didn't have any more work for me to do, so I got let go again. But then I came back 13 years later, or I've been back for 13 years. I started in the developer relations group. So I was in charge of putting on our developers conference for a few years. Then I was briefly a product manager. Then I moved into support, but I wasn't doing support. I was doing training, which is my passion. I love to do training, get up in front of people, hopefully entertain you guys a little bit, but you walk away hopefully a little smarter than when you walked in. And then most recently, in the last couple months, the training group has been consolidated, and now I'm in sales. So I've done a little bit of everything while I've been here, and I've been in total at Claris/FileMaker/Claris about 18 years, but it's spread out way longer than that. So what we're going to talk about today is FileMaker Cloud. Now internally or in the community, you can think of this as FileMaker Cloud 2.0 because we've had a cloud offering for a while. That cloud offering was also called FileMaker Cloud. But to confuse things a lot, we have renamed it to be FileMaker Cloud for AWS. Did anybody use the first version of FileMaker Cloud? Yeah. Has anybody used the new version of FileMaker Cloud? I can say anything I want then. You guys will believe anything I tell you.
And then complain later.
And then wait, Romig said, so we do have two versions of FileMaker Cloud right now. We're kind of not emphasizing the FileMaker Cloud for AWS version, but if you absolutely still want it, you can still purchase it. But we want to go forward with our new offering, FileMaker Cloud or FileMaker Cloud 2.0 if you want. So if you haven't used it, it's pretty cool. And if you've used, so nobody raised their hand about using FileMaker Cloud for AWS, right? No. So FileMaker Cloud for AWS was good, but it had some shortcomings. And one of the shortcomings was just the initial onboarding of just getting up and running with the product. You had to go to the AWS marketplace, the Amazon marketplace. It was very un-FileMaker-ish. It was very un-user-friendly. You had to answer questions you didn't really know the answers to. You saw screens with options that you didn't need to do anything with. It was kind of a mess. So partially, we have completely taken that away. And I have a video that I can show you of what the purchasing process is. It is great. Prior to that, with FileMaker Cloud for AWS, the purchasing process took an upwards of 20 minutes. That seemed, at the time it was okay, but now it just seems crazy. Now you can get up and running with FileMaker Cloud in about 2 minutes. So I'll show you that. So we'll go over FileMaker Cloud. We'll go over a new component called the FileMaker Customer Console. We're going to talk about something called FileMaker ID. For those of you who got here early, you already heard me mention that FileMaker ID is absolutely 100% required to use FileMaker Cloud. You cannot get away from using it. FileMaker Cloud ID is free. You can create one right now if you want. You can go to my.filemaker.com and sign up using your email address, whatever email address that you want to use. Your username will become your email address. Your email address will become your username. And you will need that in order to log into FileMaker Cloud. Now, this is the first step in using FileMaker ID. You're also going to need FileMaker ID to purchase things in the store later on. And at some point down the road, you're also going to need a FileMaker ID to log into the community. So eventually, you're going to have this one ID that identifies you in all of our systems. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. But the first big step is FileMaker Cloud. Okay, so the first couple of slides are super exciting positioning slides. I need to use my notes on these because I'm not as familiar with some of the terminology here, but once we get past the first couple slides, it's gonna rock. So you may have heard from going to our developers conference or the webinars that we just put on this week. You may be familiar with the next few slides here, so bear with me if you've already heard this or a variation of it. So FileMaker Cloud is not just a new product for the FileMaker platform, it's our first step in Claris's overarching strategy moving forward. Now the strategy can be defined using these 4 pillars. So starting up in the upper left-hand corner, we have Cloud First. Now a lot of people get scared by this because they hear Cloud First, but their brain registers it as cloud only, and that is absolutely not the case. So what this means is we're going to design future products and technologies with the cloud in mind. So this will provide better agility, faster speed to market, better collaboration, security, availability, the list goes on and on and on. But we are not ignoring, we're not abandoning those of you who use, for example, FileMaker Server, the on-premise version of FileMaker Server. That's not going away, but we're going to have a lot more cloud technologies that will be able to talk to our on-premise products. So the second pillar in the lower left-hand corner is web and mobile. This is pretty self-explanatory. We want to provide a rich, intuitive, and native experience across all the devices that we support, whether it's a web browser or the mobile device in your pocket or whatever. So we're slowly getting to that where we'll have feature parity across all of our platform. The third pillar in the upper right-hand corner is integration. We want to make it easier for you to connect to the services and apps that you want to connect to. This can be done today with our API integration, and tomorrow, for those of you who listened to the webinar this week, with a product that's coming to market soon called Claris Connect. We previewed Claris Connect both at the developers conference, and then, as I said, it was on the webinar this week as well. And then the last pillar is emerging technology. So things like the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, these are all interesting and popular technologies, and we will continue to prepare for and make investments in these so you'll be able to use them in your solutions going forward. So let's take a slightly deeper dive into this cloud first thing. All of our new products we're going to be building, they're going to be in the cloud. This will allow us to seamlessly stitch together cloud and on-premise services, as I already mentioned. All of our new products will be able to connect to the on-premise data sources, but they'll be born in the cloud. In addition, when users come to our website, they'll be offered cloud offerings first with the ability to purchase on-premise versions as well. So what that means is, as I said, we're not getting rid of the on-premise version of FileMaker Server, but if a new customer goes to our website, we're going to present them with FileMaker Cloud first. And then, I'm exaggerating a little bit, then off in the corner, there'll be a little button that says, if you want the on-premise version of Server, click here. So the second point is migrating existing customers to the cloud. Now, we've already started doing this. Cloud has been out in the market for a few weeks now. So for those on-premise customers, we're going to actively partner with them to provide tools and services to make sure that they can successfully start their journey to the cloud. Now, at some point, we'll make it easier than it is right now, but right now, it's about a 4-step process if you want to move your solutions from, say, FileMaker Server to FileMaker Cloud, or FileMaker Cloud for AWS to FileMaker Cloud. We have a white paper available in the community. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. It was written by, well, you can't trust the guy who it was written by. It was me. But me and another colleague, we put it together, and it goes over the 4 steps that you need to migrate your solutions. We'll briefly go over that tonight. Most of them you're already familiar with. There's a couple of things that are going to be new to you, but step 1, you already know about, and step 4 you already know about. It's step 2 and step 3 that are a little bit different. And the third point is our on-premise offerings. And we were briefly talking about this before we started, but we're not going to succeed with offering multiple versions on multiple platforms. It's a burden on our QA department. It's a burden on our development group. We can't take advantage of the latest and greatest technologies out there because we've got to bring along these old operating systems that don't support them. So our goal is to deliver the best experience with the latest security and the latest software updates. So our latest strategy involves focusing on the latest and greatest platforms. Many of you got an email in the last week or so. If you didn't, remind me. I have a PDF of it on my computer. We can take a look at it where you can see what operating systems are going to be supported going forward and which ones aren't going to be. Okay. This is the last of the positioning slides. We're not making any secret about it. The underlying technology behind FileMaker Cloud is still AWS. But the difference between FileMaker Cloud for AWS and FileMaker Cloud 2.0 is we isolate you completely from the AWS experience. If I hadn't told you that it's still running on AWS, you would not know. There is no mention of AWS anywhere. So because of that, we now own all the underlying infrastructure. But our guys downstairs, and when I mean downstairs, our guys on the first floor have your backs. We have 3 groups, SecOps and DevOps group, and the Cloud Ops group. They're going to be monitoring the health of FileMaker Cloud 24/7. And if you don't know, if you purchase a license for FileMaker Cloud, the first year of support is included, and it's 24/7. That's something we've never offered before with any of our products. So if you have a problem with FileMaker Cloud at 2 in the morning, you can pick up the phone. Now, chances are these groups already know about the problem if it happens to be an outage problem or anything like that. But just know that we're doing everything we can to make sure this is as successful and as secure as possible. Any questions about the positioning of stuff? All right, I won't need these for a while. Okay, it's really easy to purchase FileMaker Cloud. Now, normally I would walk you through this, but there's really no way for me to buy a FileMaker Cloud instance without actually buying it. But luckily, I have a recording of what the process is like, so we can take a look at that. This video was also made by somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about. That would also be me. But it really shows how easy it is to purchase cloud. And let's hope this works. Oh, I gotta turn up my volume. In this video, we will walk through the simplified flow of purchasing FileMaker Cloud, as well as the initial steps required to set up FileMaker Cloud and launch the new FileMaker Customer Console. We begin the purchasing process in the FileMaker store. Here you can see that FileMaker Cloud is available for purchase in 1, 2, and 3-year contracts, and available with 5 user licenses, with additional user licenses available in increments of 1. As you make changes on this screen, the total price in the corner is dynamically updated to reflect your changes. Once you have selected a contract length and number of users that fit your needs, click the Add to Cart button to continue. The next screen allows you to review your cart and continue shopping if necessary, as well as enter a promo code if you have one. If everything looks good, you can click Continue to Checkout to move on. The next couple of screens ask for licensing and billing information. If you already have a FileMaker ID, you can speed up the purchasing process by having much of this information pre-entered for you. Otherwise, you will need to enter in required information like your name, email address, and mailing address to continue. As a reminder, the FileMaker store supports credit cards and purchase orders as valid means of payment. If paying with a purchase order, you will need to agree to the electronic purchase order agreement before you can continue with the purchasing of FileMaker Cloud. The last step in the purchasing process is to review your licensed user and payment information and make any necessary changes before clicking the Place Order button. At this point, the FileMaker store displays your order confirmation on screen and also emails you an electronic copy. Shortly after that, you will also receive an email similar to this requesting that you complete your setup of FileMaker Cloud. To continue, you must sign into the FileMaker customer console by clicking on the link in the email. After the initial welcome screen and a review and confirmation of the terms of service, you are asked to provide a preferred host name. Choose this host name carefully, as your preferred host name will act as your FileMaker Cloud's domain and, once accepted, cannot be changed. When you have decided on a host name and click Submit on the next screen, you are presented with the FileMaker customer console. And, just like that, you have purchased and set up FileMaker Cloud. Check out more videos from Claris and visit the FileMaker community for additional resources and information on setting up and using FileMaker Cloud.
Steve had to step out for a minute. He's got to open up the door for somebody. And he's back.
So that's how you purchase FileMaker Cloud. Super easy.
So is it correct that you do not have to specify how many databases or other kinds of features, just the number of users?
Initially, that is correct. So the question was, after I catch my breath, do you have to, as part of the purchasing process, do you have to specify how many databases you're going to host? And the answer is no. Just the number of users and your length of contract. And both of those, well, not both of those, the number of users can be changed after the fact. The length of contract, you'd have to contact sales. But there's we'll look at it in a second. There's a option in the UI to up the number of users that you have. So if you start with 5 and you want to go to 10 or even 6, we can do it in increments of 1. You can do that easily within the UI. Yes?
Are the users concurrent users because it's the web, or do they have individual sign-ins?
Everybody will need a FileMaker ID. So the thought or the knowledge of concurrent connections kind of goes away with FileMaker Cloud because everybody will need their own unique ID in order to be able to log in and use their databases. Yes?
So I was just trying to do that, and like the first screen, it asks for your email address and a password. And so I just put that in, but that didn't work. I mean, it really happened once. And then the only other option there is it asks, do you need help accessing your FileMaker ID? I didn't see a place where.
There isn't something in the corner that says create. We can look at that. We can look at that later. I thought there was. Okay. So if you're familiar with FileMaker Cloud for AWS, we had these things called computes, which was a terminology kind of held, or not held over, a terminology used by Amazon Web Services, we've kind of kept that. So if you choose a 5-user instance, for example, we will automatically assign you what is known as a T2 medium compute that has 2 CPUs and 4 gigabytes of RAM. If during the purchasing process you pick any of these other tiers, we will automatically upgrade your compute power based on that. After the fact, you can change your compute power anytime that you want. So if you had 5 users, but you were, I'm not sure what you would be doing, but you have the need for increased computing power, you could go into the FileMaker customer console, which we'll see in a second, and keep yourself at 5 users, but up yourself to like an M4, 4 times large if you wanted to. So you have the flexibility of being able to configure your compute power anytime that you want.
At an additional charge?
At an additional charge. However, if you change your users from, say, 5 to 10, which would bump you from a T2 medium to a T2 large, you'll have to pay for the extra users, but the compute power is kind of rolled into that also.
One of the things they talked about is picking your URL or your host name.
Yeah.
And it gets attached to kind of this longer
right.
URL. I guess I assume you could probably create your own little redirects to make it easy for people.
Sure. Right. The only downside is that FileMaker Cloud does not support custom domains, but you could certainly do what you just said. You just can't, we'll look at mine in just a second. Mine's like my sample cloud at, and then whatever it is at the end. I can't change the part at the end. And actually, once you've gotten your, well, I think I mentioned it in the video, once you set up your custom domain or your personal domain, you can't change it. You would have to bring down that instance and start up another one if you decided that you wanted to change it for whatever reason.
Question.
Yes.
Using WebDirect, does it support WebDirect?
Yes, it does.
And do you have basically one website per database that you web enabled there, just like you do on the current on-premises?
So on the surface, WebDirect works exactly the same as it does with FileMaker Server and FileMaker Cloud for AWS. There's no difference. It looks exactly the same and functions exactly the same, and you set up your databases exactly the same. We'll take a look at that when I actually go through the demo of the FileMaker customer console and the FileMaker admin console.
So it looks, if I'm seeing things correctly, as if all of your databases are hosted on one host so that you can have live external FileMaker data sources.
Correct.
And regardless of how many you have, the back end takes care of that.
Correct. Just like, yeah, that is, again, that's no different than how it is yesterday or whenever, before FileMaker Cloud came out.
I guess one other question about FileMaker Cloud. So when we purchase, say, 5 users and those get assigned to the users in my organization, do they also then have access to the FileMaker Pro client on their desktop as well? Is that included in that user price?
Yeah, I'll show you. We make it really easy for them to get it. There is a subscriptions tab, and on the subscriptions tab, there is a sub-tab that says downloads, and they'll see not only the bits to download FileMaker Pro for Windows or Mac, but they'll also see their license certificate as well. So we make it real easy for them to get it. Okay. What was that?
I was just about to ask what those cities are.
Much like FileMaker Cloud for AWS, we will have data centers all around the world. However, at launch, we only have a data center in the Western United States. But we're going to be rolling out more as time goes on. But for now, the only one that's available is in Oregon.
What will those other ones be?
Very similar to where they are today for FileMaker Cloud for AWS. I don't have a comprehensive list, but they correspond to where the where AWS's data centers are, and they're in pretty convenient locations all the way around the world. All right, so we've already briefly talked about FileMaker ID. Again, you're going to need, everybody in this room is going to need a FileMaker ID in order to access cloud. There is no such thing as anonymous users. There's the concurrent connection model kind of falls apart with FileMaker Cloud as well. You will all need to have a FileMaker ID. You're going to use that FileMaker ID to create users. Well, you invite FileMaker ID users to your team. Then you can create groups of users that are on your team. So you might have an admin group or a support group or a sales group. And then you would use those users and groups to then set up the security in your FileMaker solutions. Now that sounds really complicated right now, but we'll walk through that process here in a little bit, and it's actually pretty easy and it works great. Okay, so let's take a look at a demo. I am going to fire up my cloud. I may get prompted for my FileMaker ID, but I won't. And so this is something you guys have probably not seen before. This is called the FileMaker Customer Console. This is where you set up users and groups and configure to a small degree how your FileMaker Cloud is going to function. You can see that there are 6 tabs across the top of the screen: Home, Users, Groups, Hosts, Settings, and Subscriptions. At the very top of the screen, it shows the current team that I'm looking at. Now, I could be a manager of multiple teams if I wanted to, and if I had multiple teams, I could click on this little drop down and I would see all of the teams that I am a part of. I only have one, so I only see one. In the middle of the screen, we have some convenient links. A place where you can download the software. We'll talk about that in a second. A place where you can get some tips on managing your team, and then some information. This takes up a ton of space on the screen, quite frankly. So there's a little thing right here that says hide. Get rid of it. This looks a lot nicer, especially if you're going to have multiple files hosted. Very quickly, they would run off the bottom of the screen. So right now, I have 2 files hosted on my cloud instance: expense reports and meetings. Now, not that you would want to do this, but you can actually launch them directly from here. If I click on this, it'll tell me this particular one is set up to open and run with FileMaker Pro Advanced. But if I click on this one, it will also, I set this one up to open up with WebDirect. So this is a convenient way as a team manager or as an administrator. Those 2 terms go hand in hand, administrator and team manager. This would be an easy way for you to quickly open up expense reports in FileMaker WebDirect if you wanted to. I also can tell at a glance that my instance is up and running because I have a green happy online box. If you get a red unhappy offline box, then something has gone wrong, but hopefully our ops department is already looking into it, but you may need to call support to figure out what's happening.
Where are they at?
Well, some of them are in Lexington, Kentucky. Some of them are here. And some of them, because we have 24/7 support, we're kind of spreading around love. So some of them are around the world to cover the times when we're asleep.
And that to launch a FileMaker Pro Advanced, is it like an FMP : //
That's a great question, actually. Can I copy this link? Probably not. I'll look into that. I don't know what technology is being used there. It very well could be. That would make sense. When you open up the FileMaker customer console, it will always open up to the home screen, just as an FYI. All right, so let's take a look at the Users tab. So the Users tab shows me all of the users that are on my team. Now, there's a couple of other things going on here as well. For example, I can see how many licenses I have left. This particular instance is a 5-user instance. So I can see that I have 1, 2, 3 people already allocated. So that means that I have 2 licenses left. That's easy math to do. But if it were a little harder than that, this would be a convenient way to find out how many licenses I have left. I can see here that some users are external users, and some of them are still waiting to be, they haven't accepted my invitation yet. I sent myself, before this meeting, an invitation to my Gmail account and purposely did not accept it, just so you could get an idea of what it looks like. So there are 2 types of users. There's an internal user and there is an external user. An internal user means that that person is managed by this team. Now, none of my users, including myself, are managed by this team. A user can only be managed by one team at a time. But they can be a member of multiple teams, in which case they would be added as external users for those teams. I know that's a little complicated, and you're like, that's very un-FileMaker-ish, but we have some excellent documentation online if you can't quite wrap your head around that. But just the takeaway is a user can only be, quote unquote, owned by one team at a time. But they can be a member of multiple teams. They'll be an internal user for the team that owns them and an external user for all the teams that he's a part of, he or she's a part of.
A few minutes ago, we had a question.
Oh. Are any way to sync multiple locations to the same database? Any ways to sync? I don't know that I understand that question.
I think maybe when they were talking about the global regions, maybe?
So a file can only be hosted in one data center. So there is no concept of having your data in 8 places around the world.
Like load balanced or?
Yeah, we don't do that. So it would be, today, if you purchase FileMaker Cloud, everybody goes to Oregon, even somebody who's halfway around the world. Yeah. But as we start rolling out more data centers, if you purchase, it will look at the address that you typed in when you, as part of the purchasing process, and it will automatically put you in the data center that's closest to you.
But you could move it?
No.
Oh.
That is a bummer right now. If you wanted to move it, so let's say you're halfway around the world and you purchase today and your data resides in Oregon. Tomorrow, we put a data center next door to your house. The only way currently to allow that, or to move your data, would be to download your databases, bring your instance down, and create a brand new instance, in which case it would then automatically go to the data center next door to you. Not ideal, I know. We'll probably have to figure out a better answer than that, but as of right now, that is the answer.
If you really want to wear it next year, wherever your customers.
Of course, absolutely. Oh, so yeah, so there is, as we said, James, there is no load balancing. James is asking, is there a way to make it available with the same speed and the same access and the same everything for everybody around the world? And the answer is data resides in one place. So we haven't gotten to the point where we can do load balancing like Eric mentioned, or having your data in multiple places. We haven't gotten there yet.
What about Web Connect?
Web Connect.
I mean, so if they're accessing through a browser, then
they're still going to access the data from wherever it is. So WebDirect would still, everybody would be getting their data from the data that sits in Oregon today. And then tomorrow, or whenever we bring up the extra data centers, it depends on where that data resides is where you're going to get routed to. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. If you're using FileMaker client and you're doing Europack or AsiaPack, then it's really slow to open.
Potentially, that is correct.
Yeah, because I was at Apple and I had the same user issue.
Right. And like I said, today we don't have a good answer for that. But as we open up more data centers around the world, hopefully that problem will go away. And this, we did the same kind of launch for FileMaker Cloud for AWS. We started with one data center and then we slowly started rolling out additional ones. So I don't want to say this isn't a new problem, but we're well aware of the headaches that this is going to cause, and we're going to get the other data centers up and running as fast as we can.
Another question.
Just when I close the panel. There is?
Douglas?
Oh, can licenses be recycled? In other words, if I remove an existing user, my available license count would, and can I add a new user? The answer is yes, but we discourage you from doing that. Ideally, we would like you to purchase an additional user for that person, but there is nothing stopping you from doing that. But we don't really want you to do that, but you can.
Well, I guess a scenario could be someone leaves my organization, they're no longer going to use that license. Can I?
Absolutely, that is a perfectly valid scenario, and one absolutely do that 100% because what else are you going to do, right? What we don't want to do is basically Eric and I sharing the same license, and when Eric needs it, we turn off my account, and then when I need it, we turn off Eric's account. That we don't want to do. So we talked about the internal versus external user types, but we have something here called licensed status. So we have a licensed user and an unlicensed user. This is much easier to understand. A licensed user basically means they can access all of the files that you have hosted in FileMaker Cloud. An unlicensed user can't. So then you're thinking, well, why would I even want an unlicensed user? You can set somebody up as an unlicensed user to maybe help you with the administration of your FileMaker Cloud. They don't need to get into all of your solutions, but you might want them to help you with some of the other non-FileMaker stuff, in which case you can add them as a unlicensed user.
So they could be the one to switch between you and Eric.
That's right. They're the ones that are going to get in trouble when we find out they're doing that. That's right.
The weekend.
So adding a user is super easy. You just click on this big blue button that says Invite User. My browser would accept it. And you type in their email address. If they do not already have a FileMaker ID, they'll get an email. Well, they're going to get an email regardless. But they will get an email asking them to create a FileMaker ID. If our system determines that they have a FileMaker ID already, then they're good to go. They're just going to log in and boom, they're part of your team. Now, as part of the initial adding of a user, you can add them as a licensed user, as we talked about, or you can add them as a team manager. Now, as I mentioned, a team manager is just a fancy way of saying admin. We recommend that all FileMaker Cloud's instances have at least 2 managers. If manager A gets hit by a bus, at least you've got manager B to still get in. If you only had one team manager and team manager A gets hit by a bus, you're in a little bit of trouble. So it's recommended that you have at least 2 team managers.
Lots of legal stuff follows.
Yeah. Early on, before we launched, I was playing around with this, and I was the only team manager, and I, what's the word I'm looking for? Unmade myself a team manager, so my team had no team managers.
Really?
Now, you're not supposed to be able to do that now, but I locked myself out of my instance, and I had to create a new one. Okay, so I'm not going to add a new person here, but you can see how easy it is to do.
So is that invite personalized at all?
I think I kept one. Let me see. For my Google one here, let me see. Don't look. I thought I kept it, but I must not have.
You search.
That's true. Of course, it helps if you can spell.
I think it just says Dear Joe Slow.
Yeah, it's very generic, but I think it does have your name in there, and then it just basically says click here to, or Steve Romig has invited you to join team blah blah blah, click here to join. It's basically that. You know what? Hold on a second. I may have been smart enough to say, you know what? Nobody wants to look at Steve's email. All right, maybe not. I thought I kept it, but maybe I didn't. Okay. Any other questions about users? Pretty straightforward. Let's take a closer look at groups. Oh, yes.
The FileMaker client that you download as a result of this particular service, can that be run on the desktop alone, or does it have to connect only to one of the solutions on the server?
Fantastic question. We get asked this all the time in every user group, so I'm glad somebody asked that. The answer is you can use, well, let me back up a bit. You need to use at least FileMaker Pro Advanced 18.0.3. That version and later, but we don't have a later, but that version is the only FileMaker ID aware version that we have. That also holds true for FileMaker Go. You need FileMaker Go 18.0.3. It works perfectly fine with, you don't need it. That's the only one that will connect to cloud, but you can use it fine with a local file if you want. It works just like any other version of FileMaker Pro has since the beginning of time.
So it's not like the concurrent user license, because that condition says it's only legal to use it if you're connected to a solution.
Yeah. You can use it for anything that you want. Okay.
Another question, Mike.
Oh.
I don't know if you want me to interrupt or just wait till the end.
Any localization to those? Oh, yes. I wish I had a version of this. It's localized in about 3 or 4 languages. So like English is on top, and then there's 3 or 4 languages in that email. So hopefully it covers most of the circumstances that you'll run into.
They're all in the same email?
Yeah. It's just, like I said, the actual invite is super small. So it just goes, just chunks of different languages.
Probably XJ.
That was a good question.
French, Italian, German, Spanish, and
English?
English.
I'll tell you what. At the end of all this, I'll find that email because it's worth just so you have an idea of what it looks like. Okay, so groups. Groups are just a way of organizing users that are in the same group. So you might have a group for sales, you might have a group for marketing, you might have a group that's whatever. So this is just a way of creating groups. Creating a group is super easy. You just click over here where it says create new group and you give it a name. So you might have a training group, right? And then you just highlight it and then you can add users to it. So I want to add Eric. Not you. I'm going to add my buddy Steve. It is worth noting that if you invite a whole bunch of people to your team and it takes them a while to click on your invitation, you can still add people that are in a pending state to groups. So you don't have to wait for them to accept your invitation before you do anything with them. You can start adding them to groups immediately. Now, a couple of people have asked, if I have dozens and dozens of users, how can I click on this button and add them all at once? Currently, you can't, one at a time. But we've heard that a million times, so hopefully that's coming at some point. That's groups. Pretty straightforward.
Daniel has a copy of the message here. It is not personalized. Dear Joe, XYZ invited you to a group. It just says, thank you for purchasing FileMaker Cloud.
Well, that's the purchasing one. But there's a different one. I'll tell you what. I will add myself to another.
Daniel probably has it here.
I can do it. I'm going to invite myself because, I need 3 users here.
And it's in a few more languages, like the Netherlands and so forth.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a second.
Another question too.
All right. Can a database file know what group a FileMaker ID belongs to? I believe the answer is
The custom functions should work.
yeah. I'll look into that. I'm sure, like Keith said, I'm sure you can.
Get account type. Get account type should say
Get account.
FileMaker space ID space and then the team name.
Okay, good.
But don't rely on the first part.
Did they hear the answer?
Okay, so on the
Do
host.
you want the repeat on that? Maybe a little louder.
Oh, where's the phone? Oh, the phone's way over there. Okay. The get account type should tell you.
So we're thinking the get account type will tell you what the team name is, or the group name is, sorry.
Oh, wait, the team name or the group name?
The group name. Or did he?
No, the regular custom, the count function. What is that? Get account group name? Security group.
Just do it.
We'll find out.
Sorry, I misheard.
Okay, the host tab, there's not a lot going on the host tab. It will tell you what your personalized URL is. It gives you some IP addresses. It gives you a convenient way to launch the FileMaker Cloud admin console, which I'll be using in about 5 minutes. It tells you how much storage you're using, and that's really about it. I will also point out, just like I hid that big banner on the home page, each one of these allows you to hide this little blue bar to give you some more information about it as well. So it gives you more screen real estate. I will point out that all of these settings are sticky. So if I quit and come back tomorrow, all of the things that I opened and closed will still be opened or closed. On the settings tab, this is where I can change my team name if I want. I can change it anytime I want to. You don't really hurt anything by doing that. Mine just happens to be called My Sample Cloud. That sounded good at the time. And then there's just some things that you can toggle on and off. Most of these are pretty benign. You can allow users to download software. We're going to talk about that in one tab. The reason why you might want to turn that off is you might be making some changes to your system and you don't want new users to get in right away. So you might want to temporarily turn off the ability for them to download the FileMaker client, for example. You can toggle on and off whether you want only FileMaker WebDirect pages to show up on the home page. The home page, again, is right here. And then we have the section for FileMaker ID accounts. You can allow managed users to change their FileMaker ID username. A username is their email address. You can also allow them to change their account country. This is all done in the profile, which when we're done with the subscriptions tab, I'll show you how to get to your profile. Although if you're pretty intuitive, you could probably figure out it's probably up here where my username is. And then there are some options for account transfers. These are on by default. You need to approve a transfer into your team as well as out of your team. So if somebody leaves the company, for example, and goes to someplace else that actually is also using FileMaker Cloud, they will need to leave your team and join the other team. Now, that brings up another point that I forgot to mention on the host tab, or not the host tab, the subscriptions tab, which we haven't gotten to yet, never mind. You will need something called the team ID in order to be able to transfer into a team. And where do you get this team ID? I'll show you in just a second on the subscriptions page. It's this big, long string. You'll need to send somebody that says, hey, if you want to join my team, you're going to need this. But as far as settings go and the FileMaker Customer Console, and again, don't confuse the FileMaker Customer Console with the FileMaker Admin Console. We're going to be looking at that in just a second. This is just basically to manage the users and groups on your team. So let's take a look at the Subscriptions tab. There's quite a bit going on here, and it's divided into two sections. We got the summary, and we have downloads. The summary is telling me all the vital information about my current subscription. It shows me my license key, it shows me when my contract started, it shows me when my contract's going to end, and it also shows me my current configurations. I can see that I have 30 gigs of storage, I have 120 gigs of data API to use, and I'm using a cloud compute of medium. Now, if I wanted to change any of those, I can click on the Upgrade Subscription button. Now, there's a little bit of a lag here as it loads up the page, so I'm going to try to ad-lib a little bit here. Or do we have any questions while this page is loading up?
Alexi has a question.
All right, let's take a look at the question. I'm not answering any questions from Alexi, sorry. How many legacy files which get, how will legacy files use a get privilege set name? I will have to try that. I don't know off the top of my head what it will do. I didn't bring a pencil, but while we're loading, I'm going to take some notes here so I can respond back to you guys. And we're still not loaded yet anyway, so that's good. So we got account.
You can take a picture of that screen right there.
That is too easy. But you're right, I should have done that. Okay, and I will remember the other one. So at some point this is going to load up, but basically what this is, it's just going to be another screen that allows me to add users. Oh, here it is. Here we go. So it allows me to add users if I want in increments of 1, and it's really nice because it'll tell me right here what changes, if I make some changes, how much it's going to cost. So if I add another user, I can see it's going to cost almost $500. Or if I change my compute, or if I change my data storage in increments of 6 gigabytes, basically you get 5 gigabytes per user. So that's why 5 user license gets 30 gigabytes. You can also increment your data API also. So you can see right here at a glance really quickly what your changes are going to cost you, and then if you're good to go with that, you can add them to your cart. I'm not going to do any of that stuff.
Any educational pricing on any of that stuff?
There is educational, nonprofit, and FBA pricing.
Everything there, or just the
well, not reflected on mine because I'm not in any of those 3 buckets, but if you were, then you would have different pricing for all those things.
I mean, I guess going back to the groups, so is the idea of groups is that you can then also manage permissions that way in the solution?
That is one of the greatest parts of groups, yes. We will look at that in about 10 minutes. All right, so let's take a quick look at the profile. So if I click on profile, oh, by the way, the subscription, I didn't finish up here. Here is the team ID, this big long thing right here. You can just copy and paste that into an email if somebody needs it.
Oh, are we recording? Are we recording?
Yes. Shame on you, Eric. I only forgot one time. Come on. Here's the downloads page. This is where you get the client. Question comes up. So if you download this version of FileMaker Pro Advanced, it's automatically FileMaker ID aware. But what happens if you already have FileMaker Pro Advanced 18.0.3 before FileMaker Cloud came out? It has no idea what FileMaker ID is. How do I make it FileMaker ID aware? Well, you can do two things. You can download this version. That seems redundant. Or you can open up if somebody sends you a link to their FileMaker Cloud hosted file, or you favorite a file that's hosted with FileMaker Cloud, it will flip something and turn your 18.0.3 version of FileMaker Pro into one that's FileMaker ID aware.
Okay, one other question on that client. So if you download this version, talked about leveling the playing field, as it were, between the on-premises and cloud. So will that client, can it connect to on-premises server? Or
Yes.
are you locked in?
Nope. This is not a FileMaker Cloud specific version. It just happens to be FileMaker Cloud compatible, but it works exactly like every other version of FileMaker Pro Advanced client.
So that was the other restriction on concurrent licensing. So it was specific to that one server. You couldn't use it to connect to other servers.
There is no limitation. You can use it to connect to basically anything that you can connect to. Okay, let's take a quick peek at the profile, although it's pretty self-explanatory. So I can add some additional information here. I can add my company name. I can add my address. I can add my title. Why would I want to do all this stuff? Well, this stuff also gets put into a database. So if you go and purchase something else in the FileMaker store, all of this stuff can be pre-populated for you, so you don't have to type it in again. It also gives you a list of all the teams that you're a member of. Again, I'm only a member of one team, so I'm only listed here once, but if I were on a half dozen teams, they would all show up on this list. Here's where I can change my password. Pretty self-explanatory. If I wanted to do two-step verification, I could click on this, and then I could have I'd have to put in a 6-digit code from my cell phone or my mobile device every time I logged in. Very typical to how two-level authentication works with around the world with the bajillion other apps that do it.
Are you using a special app for that, or just sending a text message?
Just a text message. Then we have account recovery. This is in place for the cases where maybe you do not have access to the email address that you initially set up your FileMaker ID with. So I work at FileMaker, and then tomorrow I end up going somewhere else, or my email address changes, or now it becomes steve_romig@claris.com, and the FileMaker one disappears. I'm like, oh man, what do I do? Every time I try to send an email to somebody, it bounces because I'm not getting it. So what you can do is you can set up a recovery code. So I think Eric ran into this when he was trying to create an ID. There's a link down at the bottom that says something along the lines of, I'm having problems logging in. Now, the first question it'll ask you is, okay, we assume that means you don't know what your password is. Tell me what your email address is. You don't have access to your email address, so there's another option there that says, I don't know, I don't have access to that email address anymore. It will then ask you for this recovery code. Now, that's great, assuming that you set one up. But if you never go into your profile, you'll never know that this account recovery code exists. What it is, I think it's like a 10-digit code that you'll be prompted to put in, and then it'll also ask you what you want your new email address to be, and then it'll switch everything, and you'll have access to your FileMaker ID and your FileMaker customer console again. This is a one-time use account recovery code. So I'm going to create one right now, actually. My current password, oh, that is a fantastic question.
I pushed it. It was sending me messages, but it didn't send any.
All right, so it is creating a recovery code for me. It is right here, for those of you. It's a combination of letters and numbers, and I need to write that down because this is the only time I'm going to see this. If I close this screen, it's gone. I'll never see it again. I can't. There is no, oh, show me my account recovery code. You'd have to create so basically you need to write this down, put it in a safe place.
Do you get an email with that if it changes, or?
Do you get an email?
Yeah, does the system send an email when you add that code?
Oh, like I generated one?
Yep.
We'll check. I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember.
Take a picture.
Well, yeah, you're right. I should take it. Well, you know what? This I will need at some point, I'm sure. So I'm going to put this in a better spot. But I will take a picture too.
No screenshots for you. Got to use the phone.
Oh, I guess I could have done that also. Too much overwhelming technology here. I was going to just write it down, but you guys have shamed me into using my phone or taking a screen capture. That's profiles.
I mean, the scenario you just described as far as, okay, I left the organization or something happened where I have no access to my email. Does that mean I can't log in if I still remember what that email is and the password?
You would only need that if
I'm trying to change my,
right.
User ID, or I'm trying to do some kind of action that requires an email to be sent to me.
Right.
Technically, I could get in here, create that recovery code at the point where I do actually need to, I don't know.
So there's let's see. Create a recovery code now to use later. If you forget your password and can no longer use your current FileMaker ID username, you can regain access to your FileMaker ID by entering the code when asked. Your recovery code is displayed only when it's created, so save and store it in a secure place. If you lose or forget this code, you may not be able to access your FileMaker ID.
I mean, I guess in the case of moving to a different organization, you get a new ID there, you can create a whole new FileMaker ID.
Yeah. But hopefully nobody's going to need to use this because people, unless it's tied to your work email, but if you leave the company, then chances are you're not going to need it anyway, right? And because this is kind of buried, I don't think a lot of people are going to use this unless they're very snoopy and go, oh, let's see what happens if I go into my profile here, and then they go down to the security thing and they create one. It's like, it should be like in your face when you set up Cloud that it's.
Question?
Yes.
Okay, each user, as you add users, they each get so many gigabytes.
Well, your cloud instance gets so many.
Right. Okay, that's what I was gonna.
Right.
And the other thing is, when they sign, well, you'll come to this, I'm sure, when they sign in, how they access the database.
Yes, we'll look at that in just a second. It's actually very simple. And then as an FYI, we have some notification system up here. I left one open or left one unread. Just basically tells you things that are going on in your cloud instance. So I can see that a couple buddies of mine accepted my invitation today, and so that's that. All right, so any questions about the FileMaker Customer Console? As I said, this part is brand new to you guys. We're going to look at the admin console right now. 95% of it, you guys are all familiar with. There's really, yeah.
Sort of a flavor of a question asked earlier. So my employer have a number of different, say, funding organizations, and so they might make use of a different instance of FileMaker Cloud because of the way that things are paid for.
Okay.
So if I'm wanting to access, because I support databases on multiple of these instances, is my ID going to be able to be privileged to go to those various instances?
That's everybody's favorite question. So today, we don't have a good answer for that. You would have to burn a user for every one of those instances. That answer stinks, and we know it stinks. So we are actively looking into ways to come up with a quote-unquote developer login or developer license, call it what you want. We don't have a name for it yet, because we know that is going to be a super common scenario.
And it's more than just developer, too. If we have people who are members of functional teams, it's a heavily matrixed kind of organization, especially for the engineering director that I work for. So we work for the customers who pay with these various programs. And so what I'm hearing, I think, is that we would, in essence, have to be managed under that FileMaker ID for each of those programs, in essence, burning each one of those groups' user account, because they would have to own me as a user on that team.
That is correct.
To manage these privileges.
That is correct. Hopefully, that answer changes in the near future, because we realize that's a huge pain point for you guys, or will be a huge pain point for you guys if you start using FileMaker Cloud.
That's certainly different than the site license we have now.
Yeah.
Another question there.
All righty. Yes.
Oh, what's the question?
You can regenerate. You have to use it first to create a new one. I just created one. I don't think it's going to allow me to create another one.
But he's asking, can you do it at any time? Can you generate a new account recovery code at any time?
Well, that's interesting. It's actually showing me it again, even though it's not supposed to.
Well, there we go. If you log out, log back in, I don't know.
Huh. Oh, yes, you can. Just says regenerate. So you just have to put in your password again, you'll get a new one. For some reason, I thought you had to use it first, but you do not have to.
And then erase the old one you had and
right.
rewrite it.
What I think I was thinking was, after you use it, you have to create a new one because it's a one-time usage.
But if you forgot your account, you can't get into this piece to do it.
That is correct.
That's why
You did it the first time.
yeah, that's why you can't get in there to click the button in the first place, to be able to regenerate one.
Right. If you create one and then lose it and then need it, you're in trouble.
Yep.
So Steve's tip of the day, don't lose it.
And have a second
All right.
administrator, right?
Yes. That is another good reason to have two team managers. Does a hostile a hostile takeover of your FileMaker ID and email account, you can use the recovery code to force your way back into your, sometimes it also, I suppose that is a real world example of how you would want to use it.
You didn't see it all. No.
I didn't?
Everybody hear what he said?
Yeah.
No.
I understood it. Hostile takeover.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We can come back to anything else here, but we should move on to the admin console. So I'm going to click on this, and we'll take a look at the admin console. All right. On the surface, it looks exactly like the admin console for FileMaker Cloud for AWS and the admin console for FileMaker Server on-prem. And as I said, 95% of this, or higher, is exactly the same. For example, I don't think there's anything different here really on the dashboard page that you haven't seen before in one variation or another. Same holds true for the databases page. You see all of the databases that are being hosted on the left-hand side and any clients that are connected on the right-hand side. Now, one thing that I will mention now, just because we're here, is every file that you upload to FileMaker Cloud needs to have two security things done, well, three security things, but we'll talk about the third one in a little bit. Two security things done to it. The first one is it cannot have a full access account with no password. The file basically has to be secure. So if you create a FileMaker file and it comes up with the default account, the admin account with no password, and you try to upload that immediately to FileMaker Cloud, FileMaker Cloud will say no, won't let you do it. Now, we don't enforce any special password recipes or anything. So if you just put in a password of A,
admin,
or admin, which I did with these two files, it's perfectly, it will say fine, it's secure. It just does not want to see a blank one. The second thing that you need to do is every file that's hosted with FileMaker Cloud needs to be encrypted. Now, you can encrypt a file in two ways. The first way is the way we're probably all familiar with, and that is using the developer tools within FileMaker Pro Advanced. So that is one way of doing it. The second way is if during the upload process, and we'll see what happens when I do it in a few minutes, if we detect that the file is not encrypted, FileMaker Cloud will encrypt it for you prior to uploading it. Now, the question always comes up is, where's the password? Because when you encrypt it with FileMaker Pro Advanced, you put in an encryption password, but you're not given that option when you upload the file to FileMaker Cloud. How you get the encryption password is you click on this button right here, and down at the bottom it says Show Encryption Password. And if you click on it, you have to log in using your FileMaker ID, and it'll tell you what the encryption password is. So you can, you can write it down, screen capture, phone, all the other things you guys have told me to do during this training. But that's the way that you would get your encryption password if you let FileMaker Cloud encrypt your file for you. Yes?
Your server will memorize at least one. I have it checked to find out how many encryption passwords that it will memorize for separate files. Do you have to use a common encryption password for all your files?
Nope. In fact, both of these have two totally different ones. You can use, the limitation is 125 files like it is with other versions of server. You could use 125 encryption passwords if you want.
So does that then mean that there's no more database folders now secure?
Well, FileMaker Cloud in any version doesn't support multiple folders, so everything is secure now. There is no secure folder like the server, the on-premise version has or had. The Cloud one and this version, everything goes in one folder. Yes? No? But other than that, the databases tab is exactly the same as previous versions of FileMaker, the admin console.
That behavior where it encrypts on the way up, is there any plan of doing that with FileMaker Server 2, or that's going to be just completely cloud?
I don't know.
Cloud first thing?
Steve?
Yeah.
File
Hmm?
If the auto login feature in File
Oh, Yes, that's right. No more auto login under the file options when you create a file. FileMaker Cloud does not support auto login anymore. That's another security feature because we don't want somebody logging in with a password that they shouldn't be logging in with. But then you're like, oh man, that means I got to enter in my password every single time. That's a drag. But you'll see in just a second that FileMaker ID takes care of that for you.
Does that mean then you can deploy files on WebDirect that would be accessible essentially by anonymous users?
That is correct.
Auto login.
Because everybody, including those users that are using FileMaker WebDirect, need a FileMaker ID. So there is no click on this and go to a FileMaker WebDirect page without having to put in some form of credentials.
A person can get a FileMaker ID without having a FileMaker product license.
Right. You can sign up for a FileMaker ID anytime you want. It's free. And as I said, if I didn't say that before, this is our first step into using FileMaker ID, but it's going to be, we hope, a universal way of you logging into anything that's Claris related, whether it's the community, the store, your solutions, anything else that we come up with down the road. Rather than having to memorize 50 bajillion username and passwords for your FileMaker stuff, you'll only have to remember one.
So the end user license currently requires anyone who accesses FileMaker software must be licensed. So in the case of hosting a solution with WebDirect, is that requirement still apply, or can you open it up to unregistered users?
Yeah, again, everybody that wants to log in with FileMaker WebDirect would have to have a FileMaker ID.
Well, they have a FileMaker ID, but as long as you as the host owner allow that user to add it to the group for getting in, then they would have access to it, whether or because you're basically licensing it from your side.
Correct.
Not the user's
Right,
side.
right.
So that still means basically no anonymous websites.
Correct. So you would just add them as a user here on this page in the FileMaker customer console, and then either add them to a group that we'll show in just a second how to add users and groups to your existing FileMaker solutions, but they would just be part of that group, but they would eat up one of your licenses or one of your users on the FileMaker customer console end. Yeah.
Eric just brought it up. No guest access.
Oh yeah, no guest access either.
Otherwise, they'd be charging. And
You can't just have a generic form, you just want anybody to come.
No.
Let me know what they think. That's perfect.
Yeah. They need.
The way we do RSVP for this meeting right now, people do.
Yeah.
Unless everybody had an ID.
Yeah. Then they have
Even some of the other solutions, like people get creative as far as like the login page and WebDirect, things like that. They couldn't do that because it requires launching file first and then managing the login process.
Right.
Which this would not allow.
so no surveys, no, tell me if you're coming.
Show me a web page. Or make it, right. Okay.
No ran out pages, whistleblower pages. You will have to be identified.
Okay. Backups. Backups occur every 20 minutes. Can't change that. You can preserve backups just like you can with other versions of the admin console. If you don't preserve a backup, they get auto-deleted after 30 days. The nice thing about the backup in FileMaker Cloud is, I'm going to go to one of my preserved ones that I just preserved. I am going to restore the backup. I can choose the files that I want to restore. And then let's see what happens. If I go back to databases here, you can see it has restored my meetings file, and it should be restoring, there's the other one. but they are restored on the server, but they're closed with basically a timestamp appended to the end. So the question is, oh, well then how do I, if I wanted to replace the files that are up there, what do I do? So what you need to do is you need to close the original ones and remove them. And then we have a rename feature on this menu here where you can rename them back to what they were called before, and then you're good to go. This is also the way to download files that are in a backup also, which is the functionality that we used to have in the admin console. So it's a little harder to download a file now than it was before, but it's a heck of a lot easier to restore a file than it was before, because before you had to download, they all were downloaded, then you had to re-upload them again, and you had to remove the ones that were there. So now you can do a lot of it right here, like inline, and it makes it a lot easier.
Another question about the encryption password. Even if the file is, can you retrieve the encryption password even if the file is closed on those?
Well, let's find out, because these two are closed. I can see the encryption password for this file. No problem. Oh.
What?
Nope, you can't. It has to be open.
Huh.
I thought that worked, but I guess it doesn't. And I guess that makes sense.
Server knows the encryption.
So let me open it up and make sure that that does work.
That's the thing they don't know.
They're stored in two different locations. The encryption password in the file versus how to open the file.
In the server.
It's got some sort of one-way cache now.
It's just stored in two different locations.
FileMaker server does not work that way. Right?
All right.
Oh, it does?
So the file does have to be open on in Cloud for you to see the encryption password. All right, configuration. There's some tabs here.
Backup question?
Oh, yes.
Do your backups count against your 30 gig cap?
No. Separate storage. That would be very nasty of us, because that would fill up very quickly.
Snapshots are small, very small.
How often did you say?
20 minutes.
Now, is that like an incremental backup or?
Yeah, they're like little snapshots.
Think about standby server or incremental backup.
That's what I,
Those files are being backed up.
20 minutes.
so it sounds like you would have to use the on-server to restore a file as opposed to just downloading a copy.
Like the incremental given file. It gives you the final version of the date timestamp that you asked
So
for.
that could take a while to actually
They're
prepare.
only keeping a certain time period, and those files are generally pretty small, so you'd have to have a huge amount of activity on your machine for it to take a long time.
All right, configuration tab. Real simple settings here. The general settings allows you to change your time zone if you need to. This allows you to change, the FileMaker client allows you to change the timeouts for both FileMaker Pro Advanced and Go, and a separate setting for WebDirect. Here's where you can download some logs if you need to do that. And then the auto maintenance, this is really every night, sometime in the middle of the night, FileMaker Cloud will restart itself just for maintenance purposes. If you have active users, that won't happen, but we're hoping that this will be a benign action and you won't even know that it happens, but it will happen sometime in the middle of the night. But again, if you have active users, it'll just skip it for that particular night and do it the next time it can.
By active, what do you mean?
People actually using the database, logged into the database.
They can be logged in and just be not doing it.
They can be idle.
Yeah.
If they're logged in, they
Idle.
won't.
If it's,
As soon as one user's logged in, no one can, that activity won't happen.
Yeah.
So it won't do it after the last one logs out then?
It's based on time.
Yeah, so
Is that
like
time or nothing?
Yeah, so if, let's say hypothetically, the maintenance time was midnight, and somebody was in the file at midnight and logged out at 8 a.m., the server is not going to restart at 8:01. It's going to wait until the next night and try to do it again. The connectors tab is how you can enable the data API, how you can enable OData if you want, and how you can set up external data sources if you want.
notice of defecation.
For those of you that are on the phone and you're not asking a question, maybe put yourself on mute, or I'm going to mute everybody.
Oh, I got a question.
Yes.
If a user is on and they're inactive, can you set a default to sign them off? So
That's what I just showed you.
Oh, I'm
so there's
sorry.
No, that's okay. Where was that? FileMaker clients. So right now the default is there's no timeout for advanced or go, or you can change it to 10, 15, 20 minutes or some custom setting, and a separate setting for FileMaker WebDirect users.
Idle time?
Yep. Yeah, you can use the database for 15 minutes and then we're kicking you out no matter what you're doing.
So there's no way to log everybody out at midnight?
No.
I think it's like 1,500 and something max. There's a max number that you can set it to. It's a couple of days, or a day and a half, something like that.
All right, well, okay. All right, and then lastly, we have this subscription tab. This just sends you an email of what you want to do in the event that you want to cancel your FileMaker Cloud subscription. It is worth noting that if you cancel your FileMaker Cloud subscription, we keep your databases around for 45 days. So if you didn't download them at the time that you canceled your subscription, you have 45 days to do it before your instance becomes inaccessible. So 45 days is the magic number. Any questions about the admin console?
Robert might have had a couple more.
Does renaming the file perform the same as so the question is, does renaming the file perform the same as the developer tool external data sources? If so, how does it know what other files on the server are depending on that file?
You have to match an ASP.
So you can't give it a brand new name and expect it to work. If you use the same name, it should be fine. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to show is just the kind of the workflow that somebody will go through getting their file up on the FileMaker Cloud. And as I said at the beginning of this whole thing, it really boils down to 4 steps. And now that we've seen some of these things, the 4 steps will be easier to understand. So step number 1 is you got to get all your files, whether they're local on your computer, whether they're files that are hosted with an on-premise version of FileMaker Server, whether they're already on the cloud with FileMaker Cloud for AWS. Regardless of where they are, you got to gather them up. And at least in my case, I would put them on my laptop here. So we're going to pretend that I've spent years and years and years working on this file here.
Glorious application.
I'm going to just create a starter solution. And we will just do the product catalog here for lack of anything else, and I'll stick it on my desktop. Whew. This is years of development right there, everybody. So, step one, I've already done. I've gathered up all my files. Step two, I need to go into the FileMaker customer console, and I need to create or invite users and then create groups for those users. Now, I've already done that, but we'll pretend that I didn't. So I have 5 users to choose from here, of which 2 are still pending an invitation. So I really have 3. And then I have some groups here also. And I'm going to get logged out. And it takes a second for it to, okay. And then I have 3 groups. I have an admin group, a support group, and a training group. So I've done step 2. Step 1, gather your files. Step 2, create the users and groups in the FileMaker customer console. Step 3 is my favorite part, and that is you need to modify your file. So I'm going to open this, or it's already opened up. I am going to go to FileMaker, Manage, Security, and there's a new option here. If I pull this menu down, I'm logged in. Oh, you know what? Before I even do that, let me show you what happens if you're not logged in. All right, I'm going to quit out of FileMaker and start it back up again. Okay, this is what you will see if you have a version of FileMaker that is FileMaker ID aware and you are not currently logged in. It will ask you to log in. Now, you'll remember that I already have 2 files up in FileMaker Cloud. I have I have 3 now. I have the expense report and I have meetings. But because I'm not logged in, this My Apps folder, I can't get to it. I can't see the files in FileMaker Cloud because I'm not logged in. So I need to log in first. So I'm going to log in, and I don't think my password's going to, oh, no. So once I log in, I will now see all of the files that are in my cloud instance. And if I had multiple cloud instances, I could see all of the other ones that are hosted in the other cloud instances also. All right, so I'm logged in. Now I need to open my file that I want to put up on cloud. Then I go to File, and I go to Manage, and I go to Security. And there's a new pull down here, and it will show me all of the teams that I belong to. Again, I only belong to 1, so I'll do My Sample Cloud. And I don't have any accounts set up for this file yet. So what do I need to do? Well, if I click on New, I can then click on where it says Group or User, and look at this. I can see all of the users and groups that I set up in the FileMaker customer console. So I could invite individual users if I wanted to, or I can invite an entire group. So for example, if I select the entire group here, I want the admin groups to have full access. And maybe I want the training group to have read-only access. Oops. And just like that, I have created users and groups in my accounts. Now, the nice thing about this is if I had a dozen files that I needed to upload to FileMaker Cloud, and I upload those 12 files, and then the next day, Eric shows up and he goes, hey, I want to have access to those 12 files too. All I need to do is go back into the FileMaker customer console and add him to the group. I don't need to touch those 12 files. I just need to add him to the group and boom, he has access to all 12 files just like that. So that is a humongous time saver.
Can you have multiple groups?
Sure.
For one user?
Oh, great question. Anybody think they can answer that question?
I need to assign a user full access on one data or one file and limited access on other files.
Yes. What you can't do, although we don't stop you from doing it, and it is a little confusing, is let's say I put myself in both of these groups, and there's a very good chance, just because this is an example, I did. FileMaker is going to say, okay, Steve belongs to the admin group and the training group. It's just going to, and if there was a whole bunch of other accounts there too, it just starts from the top and finds the first group that I'm a member of, and that's how it logs me in. But in your case, what you'd want to do, since you're talking about different files, you would just make sure that you're in group A for file A and group B for file B. Yeah, and then you would be fine. But if you put group A and B in the same file, then it's just going to start from the top and go, okay, Joe Blow is in group A, I'm going to log him in as a group A member. Does that make sense? So the order of this has always been important, but it is definitely important when it comes to cloud. And we don't stop you from putting yourself in every group. So just be aware of that.
If you want him to be an admin in one file and not an admin in another file, you need multiple groups to manage that.
Right. But we don't, like I said, we don't warn you. I ran into that. I was like, why am I not logging in the way that I thought? And it was because I was getting authenticated by a group that was above the one that I really wanted to be authenticated by. Now, if I dragged it down to like the bottom of the screen, then it would have worked. But ideally, you don't want to put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, we got feedback on that in the past, and that's why you see the priority, the first column on the left. The numbers there indicate that's the priority order.
Yeah.
When we start at the top.
That's what that says is priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can still move them around.
You can drag and drop.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's not obvious, but yeah, you can drag them. I just moved training above admin, and now I just put it below admin.
Yeah, so I think the guidance has been to create groups that make sense for each project. So rather than have one admin group and use that in all of your files, if you need different levels of admin for different files, you probably have like, project X admin, project Y admin, and if they're different people, then yeah, they're going to be different people, and then that's how you would sort out based on roles rather than.
Just want to make sure it wasn't global across all your apps.
Nope. Unless you tried to use the same groups across all of your apps, in which case the answer would be yes. But if you use that example and created ones that are specific, then you'd be perfectly fine.
Okay.
One other nice little tip here. You start creating users and groups and you're like, oh man, I forgot to create the dinner group or whatever. We have a little button right here that has a button with two heads. And if you click on it, it takes you back to the customer console, in which case I can create that dinner group. And I can add whoever I want to it. We'll just randomly pick Steve Krosh here. For those of you who don't know Steve, the dude is about 6'8", and if he could eat all of us under the table. The dude is a nonstop, like a garbage disposal with legs.
He's always first in line.
And he's always he loves food.
he runs like huge amounts of miles every day.
All right, so we added the dinner group. Let's go back to FileMaker Pro here, and now if I click on the groups here, it may take a second for it to refresh. Or maybe I got to close out this.
Yeah, or switch teams.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Now this new account, there's the dinner group. And we'll give that read-only access also. So we'll click on OK. But what am I getting prompted with? Remember, I need to have all of my full access passwords secure. So this is basically saying, do I want to allow this? I'm like, no. So now I need to go back to the local accounts, and I need to change this password. And as I said before, we don't have any rules. I'm just going to make it A. FileMaker is perfectly happy at that point. And we're done. That's step 3. Step 1, gather your files. Step 2, create users and groups. Step 3, FileMaker ID-atize your solution. And step 4 is one we're all familiar with, and that is put it up to the cloud. The method is pretty much exactly the same. Oops, that's not what I want to do.
Mute Sean, I think.
Look, no matter where you stand on impeachment, and I believe this president deserves to be impeached, the vast majority.
Yeah, just got a commercial in.
Okay, he's muted. Okay, so step 4 is upload the file to host. Can't be open. Thinks for a second, and here we go. Now remember, I did not encrypt this file. This file is unencrypted right now. It says it's ready to be uploaded. If I had multiple teams, I could select which team I wanted this file to be uploaded to. Again, I only have one. So let's see what happens. I'm going to upload it. Just thinking for a second.
That's being eared on the back end. That's what.
And we're done. So now, and it opened it up, and I can see that it opened up because in parentheses it says My FileMaker Cloud. And now if I go back over here, there's the 4th file. Just like that, put a file up on cloud. Now if I wanted to, if I click on this, again, it's only open to FileMaker Pro Advanced, but if I go in here and I simply make the change for WebDirect, I may have to refresh this page. This file is now available on WebDirect. It is worth pointing out for those of you who do use WebDirect, you did not see a option to turn it off. It's on all the time. You can't turn it off. So a couple of other questions that have come up. You can use the admin API with FileMaker Cloud. What other questions have come up? No plugins.
You can turn off the extension or the extended privilege, right? Thereby making the file not available on.
Well, yes, but I'm just saying there is no master switch on the server side to turn WebDirect on and off. It's on all the time. But yes, you can do it on a file-by-file basis like you've always been able to. Yes?
Non-availability times, because there will be times when you're doing software updates, Java patching, things of this nature. When is that, and is it scheduled?
So we're hoping all of that will take place during that maintenance window that I was mentioning, sometime in the middle of the night when we're all sleeping. And it will, if people happen to be logged in, then it won't happen. But it should happen in the middle of the night.
Depending on where your client audience is.
Well, right. So if you have a world, if your clients are around the world, then yes, that could be somewhat problematic, but it shouldn't be. We're hoping it's not going to be a huge deal.
So if you've got people on there all the time, so that it's busy, then what happens? Are you notified that says, hey, we can't do patching?
Yeah.
We need to do this?
So much like the notification system in FileMaker Cloud for AWS and FileMaker Server, there's a little bell up here, and you may get a notification that says something along the lines of, we need to restart your instance, or there's an update available, and then you can just not schedule it, but you can click on it at your leisure when you know nobody's in there and restart your system that way too.
Any idea about how long that process would take?
It's very quick.
So OS updates are in addition or as part of that?
Oh, no, this would just be updates to the bits, the FileMaker Cloud bits.
Okay.
Yours, well,
So while
yes.
AWS is handling things, they use a high availability model and they swap you off to a different VM?
So, yeah, I just know when I've seen the restarts, they're very fast. But to your point, if there is a big OS level update that needs to take place, do you guys know how that's handled?
That comes with the VM. So when we package up on AWS a copy of the new server product, it comes, it's just a VM. So at that point, your files are stored in a different location. So we bring down the old VM, create the new VM, attach your files to it, and start it up.
I'm familiar with how it works on vMsphere. And you said the high availability, that it actually migrates to the host that's active.
I don't know if it preps a host first before bringing you down. I don't know the order of these things.
Yeah.
But it tries to make it as fast as possible.
It is way faster than you would expect it to be. Two things I was going to mention, two big things that the current version of FileMaker Cloud does not support are server-side plugins and external authentication. So if those are roadblocks, then you might want to consider using something else. But if those are not a concern, ideally at some point down the road, we want to get feature parity across all the platforms. We're not there yet, obviously, but for version 1, we just don't support the plugins and external authentication at this time. Yeah.
Quickly going back to the auto login feature. So if that's not supported in the FileMaker Cloud, is that going to go away in the on-prem?
I don't believe we have any plans to do that.
I do have a solution that relies on that, so I want to know if I need to start building something a little different.
Relies on what?
Auto login?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. No, auto login is not supported.
On cloud, but will it go away from the on-premises server web
Yeah,
direct?
not. There's no plan.
No plans. Did I see a question pop up here?
Yeah, 3.
Oof.
External storage for containers, how's that going to be handled?
Cool.
External storage for containers is supported, but they have to be secure storage. They cannot be external open.
And retrieving your backups and things like that from the, I guess that's all we're saying.
Does that count towards your storage limit?
Their containers?
Yep.
Absolutely.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Alexi's question from 649 that nobody told me about. Can you retrieve the encryption password even if the file is closed on the host? So, oh wait, that's not her question. Is it possible to log into a database with different privilege sets using the same FileMaker ID? For example, if you want to test the file with a user level account and also be able to get in with full access as a developer.
You just have to move the user around.
Yeah.
Just like you would do with any other domain authentication or whatever.
Right.
Or you fool around with the order of the groups.
I mean, in the on-prem version, you could just create multiple IDs, right? But that doesn't work in the cloud scenario. So yeah, you would have to move yourself into different groups to be able to test that scenario out. Hold on, let me knock out the online ones here first, because I think there was one more. I may have just missed this, but since it is a VM, how often does Claris back up the VM? So backups occur every 20 minutes. We don't really back up the VM per se, but we back up your data, which is part of the VM, every 20 minutes.
There's no user data on the VM. It's all stored elsewhere.
Yeah. What about a staging environment? There, we don't really have one for cloud. Not my files, like all the settings and such. Oh, the settings do not get backed up. We're just backing up your data. So if you did a backup and then changed every setting in FileMaker Cloud and then restored the backup, it would still have the same settings. It wouldn't have these settings prior to the backup.
That information is stored elsewhere and is automatically backed up as part of our keeping track of everyone's system.
Is there a file we can download that represents that?
No. It's not equal to your settings file on-prem.
So your question brings up another question or a comment, and that is, if you were savvy enough with FileMaker Cloud for AWS, and certainly if you're using the on-premise version of FileMaker Cloud, you had access to the OS. You absolutely do not have access to the OS at all with FileMaker Cloud. In fact, only a select few in this building can do that. So the people in support used to be able to SSH into your FileMaker Cloud for AWS instance with your permission, of course. They can't do that anymore.
Did you say this supports server-side schedules or not? I think the earlier version did not.
You cannot schedule scripts, no. Hold on a second. I believe the admin API allows you to do that, but I need to double check that. There's no UI that allows you to schedule scripts, but the admin API may allow you to do that.
And is there a documents folder or temporary folder where there's certain folders now that server can write to?
Yes.
Things like using the new set of file commands that you might interact with.
I think the only two folders that you have access to are the ones that you mentioned, the documents folder and the temp folder. That's documented in the help.
So is that through the console?
You can't.
How do you get access to those?
You would use isn't there a get documents path folder? I think you would use that.
None of those functions work on server products.
Oh, actually, you know what? I knew that because I've run into that many times myself.
Yeah, because that's one of the reasons I use that is to move data from one table to the other within the same file. And because normally it doesn't, because the running headless, I guess this may answer the question about running server-side scripts. If you're not running server-side scripts, then this doesn't come up. If you're running headless, it doesn't have the concept of bound set between one table and the other. And so you end up having to write an intermediate file, like to documents or temporary, and then you import it. Basically, you memorize the path with a script variable, and you just go ahead and export and import. So am I hearing that doesn't work either?
I will need to double check that, but it sounds like it doesn't work.
It sounded like when FileMaker Cloud for AWS was originally launched, we were going to be back in the business of robots, running robot systems that log in.
Anything else?
Was there one question about account group name and account privilege setting from online? I think I just tried it. Yeah, it works the same as before. That's not changed. You have to log in. If you log in as a group and you get account group name, you'll get the name of the group.
Okay.
From the FCC.
So the answer is use the name functions?
Yeah.
the getter functions for.
Yeah, get account group name, get account privilege setting, so on.
So related to that, if I've got a user assigned to the dinner group, and I've got 3 different apps, I can have different permissions for the dinner group within each of those 3 different apps. Those are set granularly within the apps, or it's...
That is correct. So one could have full access, one could be read-only, and the other one could be data entry or whatever other access privileges you set up. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just a FileMaker feature. You're just assigning different groups with different privilege sets.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't global.
Anything else? I'm shocked I went 2 hours. I thought for sure we'd be done in an hour. So you guys, thanks for hanging in there. You asked a lot of great questions. Are you guys excited about cloud?
I don't know.
You don't know?
What's happening to all the old
The automation
AWS
worries me the most.
cloud?
So FileMaker, that's a good question. FileMaker Cloud for AWS is still going to be available, and you can still purchase it. We're not going to push people to it. We want people to get onto FileMaker Cloud, but if you want to, and there's going to be there's some reasons why you might want to use FileMaker Cloud for AWS, because it might support some things that FileMaker Cloud doesn't. So that's up to you if you want to go that route. But you'd have to go through the AWS Marketplace to purchase it, like you always had to, but we're not going to have links to it, or we're going to have very small links to it on our website, because we want people to use FileMaker Cloud. So in the short term, or there is no plans to just kill it. It's going to kind of somewhat live side by side, but we're not going to invest a lot of additional time and money into it. We're going to go full speed ahead with FileMaker Cloud. Anything else?
Still can't get my ID.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll look into that.